The story began in a tense room where President Jang Won-tak and his secretary, Chief Lee, were preparing for a national address. The president asked if it had really been that long, noting that power would be restored to the entire country in 30 seconds. He instructed his staff to ensure that everyone around them was watching the broadcast. Across the nation, citizens turned on their televisions to watch the address. President Jang Won-tak addressed the people, acknowledging that they must have been greatly distressed by the inexplicable lockdown, and he sincerely thanked them for their cooperation. He then declared a state of emergency martial law, effective precisely at 5 p.m. on July 16. He explained that the army had taken control of media outlets and national infrastructure, and that major roads had been closed. Visibly trembling, the president started to explain his reasoning but paused to ask Chief Lee for a cigarette. As the chief retrieved one from his suit, he remarked that the opposition party members were going to be furious. The president laughed nervously, lighting the cigarette with shaking hands, and told Lee to try to understand the gravity of the situation. Blowing smoke from his mouth, the president continued. He stated that the reason he had declared martial law was that he wanted the nation to face a dignified end. He revealed that the scenario from the game, Survival Life, was occurring in reality. The asteroid from the game, Eun Jam Bai, was about to hit the Earth. He cited reports from Dawn indicating that the U.S. military had failed to intercept the asteroid. Consequently, fragments had crashed into the sea near Okinawa, causing catastrophic damage. He confirmed the regretful news that the people of Japan were currently turning into zombies. Furthermore, the zombie spores originating from the asteroid were predicted to make landfall in their country that day at 1 p.m. Addressing his fellow citizens, he admitted they could not avoid the zombie apocalypse. However, he noted that intelligence suggested a small number of people, including the awakened, might be immune to zombification. He announced that he had prepared time shelters at marked locations for them, though they would not be open for 1 year for safety reasons. He urged people to make their way there and mentioned that a guide on dealing with early-stage monsters would be distributed via flyers dropped from airplanes. With a sad, stressed expression, the president announced that all thermal power plants would soon be shut down. He confessed that while he was a man of many shortcomings, he believed he had done what was necessary in their final moments. Bowing before the monitor, he said it had been an honor to be with his fellow citizens and expressed a hope that they would meet again, alive and well. Finally, he thanked the anonymous informant who had provided the exact D-Day date before the connection was abruptly lost. As the screen went black, a man seated in front of a monitor with his dog let out a heavy sigh. He muttered that he had truly hoped the end wouldn't come. Standing up, he equipped a unique-looking gun on his back and gripped a hammer in his right hand. He remarked that since the end was already there, he had no choice but to survive. The man smiled, declaring himself a veteran of the apocalypse. Flashback. A few months earlier, inside the game, Survival Life, 4 players were about to engage in a battle with zombies. One player asked if the group was ready to fight. Another, whose avatar had long eyelashes, confirmed they were ready but noted that if he lost today's bet, it would be his 3rd loss in a row. A third player, wearing a bald rabbit hairband, teased him, saying that if he got swept 3-0, he was basically worthless. A player in a strawberry costume teased the first 2, claiming they kept getting their kills stolen because they were just trying to brute force the game. In front of them stood Kimbapjawa, their leader, who wore a sushi wrap as a headband and wielded a bow and arrow. He teased the bald player and the one with eyelashes, telling them they were nothing without their flashy moves. The eyelash guy snapped back, telling him he didn't need backseat gaming and asking if they could just start already. The rabbit hairband player excitedly yelled for them to go and wreck the enemy. The strawberry costume player told them to suit themselves, offering a 1-minute head start. The game began. The rabbit hairband player jumped in, warning the others not to regret it, followed by the eyelash guy facing down the zombies. This VR game, known as Sura, was an apocalypse simulation mixing zombies and fantasy monsters. It boasted an insane difficulty level that made even hardcore Korean gamers flinch, yet it had shot to the top of the charts upon release. However, the difficulty eventually took its toll. The rabbit, bald, and eyelash players found themselves cornered by a large ogre monster. Panicked, the eyelash player asked what they should do. The strawberry player interrupted, announcing that the 1 minute was up, and pushed an ignition switch. A massive explosion blasted the ogre's face. Kimbapjawa delivered the final blow with an arrow shot to the ogre's head, finishing the round. Later, the group rested on top of a wrecked building. The rabbit hairband player asked if they had anything else to play. The eyelash player replied that they wouldn't be making stupid bets if they had other options. The strawberry player agreed, complaining that Sura was boring and there was nothing left to do. The eyelash player noted that it wouldn't be weird if the servers shut down that very day, and the strawberry player seconded the sentiment. The rabbit hairband player complained about the lack of dopamine and the need for excitement. Kimbapjawa, trying to keep his friends from quitting, reminded them that he had suggested taking it slow. When the strawberry player asked if they wanted to play another game, the rabbit hairband player declined, saying his body couldn't handle it. The eyelash player grinned and agreed. Suddenly, Kimbapjawa noticed something in his system interface. He pointed out that it had been a while since they had seen a message in the chat. The four of them got excited, realizing they were no longer the only 4 concurrent players. There was a 5th. The strawberry player shouted that the game was booming. They guided the new player through the basics. The newbie promised to contact them after finishing the tutorial. However, 2 hours later, the newbie asked if that was really just the tutorial, complained that it was too hard, and quit the game. The 4 friends were shocked and disappointed. The strawberry player kicked a severed zombie head in anger, asking if it always had to end like this. The rabbit hairband player questioned why the developers kept updating content without lowering the difficulty. The eyelash player agreed, wondering what was going on inside the developers' heads. One by one, the friends said their goodbyes. The strawberry player logged off, and when Kimbapjawa asked if he would return the next day, the response was a hesitant, probably. Kimbapjawa remained alone, facing the horde of zombies and fantasy monsters. He narrated that even as the other veterans logged in less and less, he remained. He recorded update videos to enjoy the game with them and streamed day and night, waiting for their return. Several months passed. The tutorial difficulty was drastically lowered, and the early game experience was improved. In addition to existing monsters, grotesquely mutated creatures began to appear. Kimbapjawa welcomed the massive updates, but his friends seemed to have lost interest completely. Eventually, Sura was left with only 1 concurrent player. Playing alone, Kimbapjawa cursed, admitting to himself that the game was hopeless and deciding to quit for real. Just then, a system alert appeared. It was an announcement from the Survival Life Operations team thanking the users. They stated that in 1 week, the service would be permanently terminated. Kimbapjawa shouted angrily at the system, asking if they had just been waiting for him to give up. A large bull-type monster roared, surrounded by a red aura. He whispered that he had wanted to catch that one monster with his friends before he quit. A wave of despair washed over him. He stopped his recording, took off his gear, and deleted the streaming account and the MeTube channel where he had broadcast for 5,000 hours. However, he couldn't bring himself to throw away the hard drive full of memories, so he shoved it into a storage closet. Kimbapjawa signed off, and Kong Seong-ho truly started living his real life. Present day, 3 years later, Kong Seong-ho had returned to reality, working as a chef in his own snack business on the first floor of a house he had inherited after losing his parents. Business was good. One day, Mi Kyung, a hairdresser and regular customer whom Kong found attractive, showed him something on her phone. She told him she had heard from some kids that a certain trend was sweeping online communities. The post claimed that people could access a status window simply by shouting the words out loud. Mi Kyung admitted she had tried it earlier, but nothing had happened. Kong laughed, telling her she was gullible and that there was no way such a thing would appear. However, that night, Kong decided to try it. He shouted, "Status window." At first, nothing happened. But then, a spark of lightning flashed, and a rectangular blue screen appeared in front of him. Shocked, he questioned if it was real. He read the display: Health, 11. Strength, 12. Agility, 9. Dexterity, 11. Perception, 10. Traits, Open Private Portal. He realized he had seen this interface somewhere before. It was from Survival Life. Confused, he noted that Sura didn't have a trait system. He read that the Open Private Portal trait could be used by the holder simply by saying the command. He tested it, saying, "Open Portal." A portal manifested before him. He stared in awe, recognizing it as the exact replica of the labyrinth gate from the game. He touched his hand to his face in confusion, wondering if this was really the Survival Life system manifesting in reality. He checked his phone for news about the game. He found an article stating that an asteroid named Eunjam Bai was being monitored by NASA, though the probability of it hitting Earth was deemed close to 0. Kong tried to convince himself the name was just a coincidence and that it was too early to jump to conclusions. But as his hands shook, he looked at the article and asked himself, what if it is real? He knew what the game was like. Staring into the swirling vortex he had just opened, he wondered if the proof he needed lay inside the portal. Kong Seong-ho stood before the swirling vortex he had summoned, but he hesitated, backing away. He asked himself if it wasn't too dangerous to enter without a plan. Deciding to test the waters, he tucked a ladle through the portal to feel the ground on the other side. When he pulled it back, he saw only dirt. He reasoned that the other side wasn't a labyrinth or a dungeon. Perhaps the portal was simply a warp that teleported him to another location on Earth. Gathering his resolve, he prepared his supplies. He told himself that since he had performed a minimal safety check, he should push through. Hesitantly, he stepped inside. What he witnessed on the other side was far from what he had expected. He found himself standing in a vast mountain range filled with beautiful scenery. A cool breeze brushed against his skin, contrasted by the warmth of the sunlight. He nearly bit his tongue in shock, wondering if what he was seeing was real. A bluebird sang nearby, and the air was slightly crisp. He checked his phone, no signal. He assumed that, at the very least, this place was a remote area difficult for ordinary people to reach. Taking out a marker, he decided to leave signs on the trees to ensure he wouldn't lose his way. He told himself to explore cautiously and leave a trail. He continued his journey along the unknown mountain path for several hours. Eventually, exhaustion set in, and sweat streamed down his face as the day grew hotter. He wondered why the forest was so endless. After hours of walking without encountering a single soul, he silently pleaded for something to show up. As if answering his wish, a shadow moved behind the trees, its eyes glowing with a menacing red light. Startled, Kong fell back onto the ground. Emerging from the brush was a valley deer, snow white from its fur to its antlers. Kong watched in awe. The name, valley deer, and the fact that a system window had popped up to identify it confirmed his suspicion. This place was not Earth. The deer stared at him intensely for a moment before turning and running away. Scrambling back to his feet, Kong muttered that although the creature's stare had frightened him, it didn't seem to be aggressive. He dusted himself off, thinking that he still hadn't found definitive proof of the apocalypse. He reasoned that it would be a different story if he had encountered stone monkeys or humped boars, noting that he had never actually seen a valley deer in the game, Survival Life. However, as he prepared to draw his knife for emergencies, he admitted that he had harbored a hunch from the moment he arrived. He realized this space was closely related to the game. He continued down the path, grip tightening on his weapon. He told himself he had been forcing himself to ignore the signs because nothing was certain, and he wanted to deny that a disaster was coming to humanity. But that hope was short-lived. Further down the path, he spotted something familiar. He picked up a fruit, a sun apple. He asked himself if it was safe to eat, then took a bite. A system notification immediately appeared. Your stamina has been slightly restored by the effect of the sun apple. Kang's thoughts raced. The effect was exactly the same as the sun apple juice sold in the game's cash shop. He cursed under his breath, realizing this confirmed everything. To top it off, he spotted a brown object lying on the ground, goblin droppings. He laughed like a madman, telling himself to just accept it. He convinced himself that this was his new reality, not a game anymore. The end was indeed coming. Having turned his sense of déjà vu into certainty, he decided to return home to prepare. Back in his room, Kong immediately began to browse the internet. He retrieved the hard drive he had stored away and reviewed the early game footage from his time playing Survival Life. Watching the video, he lamented that he had only recorded it because he liked the game, never imagining it would be used for survival. He read an article within the game lore on the screen. The alien asteroid, Eun-Jam-Bai, fell near Okinawa on July 20th. In an instant, Okinawa was devastated. People infected by the zombie spores slowly underwent zombification. 5 hours later, the decay began, the progression of the Iron Death disease. Kong calculated that there were 32 days left until the apocalypse. He recalled that Survival Life was full of unfriendly and annoying mechanics, but the absolute worst was the Iron Death disease. It was a phenomenon that caused all metal to literally crumble away. The disease would sweep through areas infected by zombie spores 5 hours after impact, instantly reverting human civilization to the Stone Age. Although the disease would eventually subside after 6 months to a year depending on the region, the initial damage would be catastrophic. However, Kong realized that this Iron Plague was meaningless to him now. He noted that his trait was Private Portal. It was just a hypothesis, but he believed the Iron Death disease wouldn't be able to pass through the portal. After finishing his initial analysis, he used his life savings to buy all sorts of survival supplies, including weapons, food, tools, medicine, and equipment needed for self-sufficiency. He checked an online post titled, Awakened Community. Anonymous number 1, any awakened here? Raise your hands. Anonymous number 2, I checked the mood of the community while thinking about what to do next. Anonymous number 3, how many of these same posts are there? If it's real, prove it. Anonymous number 5, stop with this bullshit, stop spouting nonsense. Anonymous number 6, I used my trait to steal 7 million won today. So awesome, Kong scoffed, wondering how they could be so carefree. As soon as morning came, he went out to collect his supplies. On his way home, he managed to buy a 60-pound hunting bow in a private sale. A thought suddenly occurred to him: was he overreacting? He told himself that if the apocalypse didn't come, then whatever, he would just have to struggle financially for 2 or 3 years. After finishing his errands, he placed a sign on his shop declaring it temporarily closed, so as not to waste time. He sighed, overwhelmed by how quickly his life had changed overnight. A loud voice caught his attention. It was Mi Kyung. She asked if he was closing down the shop. Kong made an excuse about remodeling the old place. She remarked that he must have made a lot of money, but he denied it, saying the building was just old. He tried to excuse himself, but Mi Kyung seemed hesitant. She started to say something, then stopped and told him she would see him later, returning to her parlor. Kong wondered what she had been trying to say. He realized it was a situation where he could have easily asked her out, but he kept his mouth shut. He told himself that from now on, there were serious things he needed to do. He went to his room and opened the portal again, carrying a box containing his bow and arrows. In the game, his playstyle had been that of a planner, one who devised detailed strategies to overcome challenges. Consequently, among the veterans, he had lacked physical skills. He explained to an invisible audience that in Sura, stats weren't granted by leveling up, they were earned through the results of hunting and exploration. He went into the woods, drew an arrow, and aimed at a target on a tree. He wondered if it would work. To his surprise, the bow was easier to draw than he had thought. Though his hands were shaking, he held the aim. He watched a tutorial he had downloaded on his phone. The instructor in the video said, "Now, take a shot. Draw, aim, shoot." He visualized his avatar from the game. The arrow flew perfectly on his first try. He was amazed, wondering if he had been Legolas in a past life. He noted that he could only draw the string properly about 5 times before tiring, but it wasn't bad. He resolved to go hard on strength training starting that day. Having finished the basic preparations, he moved on to the next step. He decided there were 2 things he needed to take care of. First, to figure out if he could hunt monsters in his current state, and second, to build a hideout inside the portal to store his supplies. He practiced swinging his knife and harvesting sun apples, preparing for every situation and the future ahead. He reminded himself that this preparation was the reason he had remained a veteran in Sura. Later, he explored the mountain, searching for more goblin droppings. He reasoned that looking for droppings was the best strategy because goblins were monsters that typically lived in groups. Finding a single pile of droppings was abnormal. He deduced that the fact that droppings contained only seeds suggested the goblin hadn't been eating properly. Just as he predicted, there was a high chance it was an outcast from its group. He covered his nose against the smell, poking the dung with a branch. He told himself he had to find this guy, as it wasn't often one got the chance to test themselves in a real fight. As darkness fell, he heard wolves howling and deduced he was getting closer to the valley. Suddenly, he hid behind a tree. He had spotted the outcast goblin he had been tracking. It was an old goblin standing by the river, about to drink. Kong thought it looked creepily identical to the ones in Sura. System alert: Monster number 1 goblin. Grade: low-tier species. Main weapons: spears and poison darts. Kong recalled that they especially enjoyed incapacitating opponents with paralyzing poison to torment them. This was the reason he had chosen a bow as his first weapon. He prepared to draw his bow, telling himself to stay calm. It was an old goblin, and perhaps because it was exiled, it wasn't carrying a poison dart or a spear. He tried to steady his shaking hand, convinced that if he didn't get nervous, he could hunt it. However, the veteran goblin noticed the killing intent. It turned around to look just as Kong released the arrow. Due to the sudden movement, Kong missed the headshot, striking the goblin's right arm instead. He tried to draw his bow again, but the goblin reacted instantly, throwing a stone that struck Kang's hand, causing him to lose his grip and drop the weapon. Kong realized his opponent was a seasoned fighter. He drew his knife while the goblin brandished a sharpened stone shiv, preparing for a duel. They exchanged attacks like melee veterans. The goblin landed a heavy blow to Kang's stomach. In desperation, Kong tackled the creature, wrestling it to the ground. He pinned the goblin, spinning his knife to stab it, but the creature intercepted the blade's path to its chest. However, using the gravity of the execution, Kong forced the knife down, slowly piercing the goblin. The goblin died, the red glow in its eyes fading to pale nothingness. Kong gasped for air, laughing in disbelief that he had actually done it. A notification alerted him: "You have acquired 2 points." He looted the body, finding a pouch of guaca powder and vegetable oil. He recalled that in the game, combining these 2 created an ointment, and decided to give it a try later. He started digging to bury the body, knowing it would be dangerous if a group found the corpse. While digging with his hands, he heard a splash in the river. He turned to look. 2 red trout were shining in the water under the night sky. He paused, thinking that if this was a valley where red trout lived, it meant a dangerous ecosystem. Suddenly, he sensed a massive presence behind him. He turned around. Standing there was a creature with the head of an owl and the massive body of a bear, an owl bear. Only 2 words escaped Kang's mouth. I'm screwed.